Now, when Buddha explained the Four Noble Truths, he said, birth is suffering, old age or aging is suffering, death is suffering, and so on. So we will go by that, and we will study that explanation in detail. Are you familiar with the first sermon? No? Oh. Okay, now you go to paragraph 31. So what do you find there? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering. That is the description given by the Buddha of the Four Noble Truths. The first one, this is the first one. So here Buddha said, birth is suffering, right? That is one thing. And then aging. So birth is suffering, aging is suffering, and then what? Death is suffering, and then sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering, and then association with unloved. Please read it. And the separation from the loved is suffering, and then
to get what one wants is
okay, and then
in short, number 5 aggregates as objects of faith or suffering.
yes. So this is the explanation of the noble truth of suffering. So we will try to understand each one of them. So Buddha said birth is suffering. Aging means to get old. Decay is suffering, and death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, and also are suffering. Here, birth means actually not the coming out of mother's womb. Birth here means the conception. Now for human beings, and they have to stay in their mother's womb for say 9 months or 10 months, and then the mother gives birth to the child. But here birth means not giving birth to the child, but the moment when conception takes place. So the very beginning of one life, so that is called jati or birth here. So according to this teaching, birth begins not with coming out of the mother's body, but begins with the moment when conception takes place. So from that time on, it is called jati or birth. So here Buddha said that birth is suffering. Now to be in the mother's womb and then to be born, all these involve suffering. Now that the baby has to stay in the mother's body for a long time in a very narrow place and so on, and you can imagine how a baby would suffer even before it was born. So Buddha said, birth is suffering. And in the commentary, there's a long description of how great the suffering there is, and during the time when the baby is in the mother's womb and so on, that you can read it later. So birth is described as suffering. Why is birth suffering? Birth is called suffering because it is the base for all suffering. Now once there is a rebirth, there is also old age and death and disease and so on. So all these we encounter or we experience because there is birth. If there were no birth, we would not suffer all these things. So since birth is the base for all suffering, birth is also described as suffering. Now you turn to paragraph 42. About 4 lines down, you will say all this jati is the base for all this dukkha, something like that. Just above the verse. Thus rebirth is the base of all dukkha, something like that. There are verses, right? Yeah, above the verses, what do you find? Yeah, right. Base or something. Right. So jati, no? Birth is said to be suffering or dukkha because it is the base for suffering. So you note it down in your note paper. You say here birth, right? And on the other space you say because it is the basis for suffering. So birth is said to be suffering because it is the basis for all suffering we experience in one life. Now the next one is jara, I mean aging or getting old. So getting old is also described as suffering. Getting old means not when you become 40, 50, 60, 70 years of age, but getting old begins immediately after birth. So immediately after birth there is the aging, because moment after moment you are becoming older and older. Now I don't know your name. Evie. Amy. Yeah. So people will say you are young, right? You are growing up. But according to this definition, you are growing older and older. Do you like it? Right? So from the moment you took conception, right? You are getting older and older day by day. So you are older than you were 1 year ago, right? And you are older than the time when you enter this hall, right? So you are getting older and older and older. That is what we call jara. So in the world we say, oh, this girl is growing up to be a woman and so on. But according to the teaching, you are getting older and older and older, and you don't like to be old. No? But can you escape it? Can you stop it? Can you run away from it? No. That is the one aspect of jara, or aging being dukkha, suffering. You don't like it, but you have to take it, right? And also, when one becomes old, there are many things that that one doesn't like. Now, when you get old, your body becomes weak. You are not strong as you are young, and that you will understand only when you get to be 70 years old or 80 years old. Now, you cannot walk as fast as before, or you cannot pick up things and so on. And then your eyesight becomes weak. You have to put on glasses, and your hearing may be impaired and so on. So all these come from aging, because your body is getting older and older. It is become less and less efficient, and you no longer look young when you are 60, 70 or 80 years old. And then you forget many things when you get old. And when you get old, sometimes younger people don't want to be with you. Then they may say, oh, this old man, old woman is interfering with us. We don't want to be near to him or to her. So you are like left out from the family or something like that. So all these you suffer because there is old age, there is aging. Because you become old, you have to suffer all these. And also sometimes people act like a child when they become very old. So all these you suffer because there is old age. So old age is also described as dukkha. Now, please turn to paragraph 44. About the end of the paragraph 44, what do you find there?
It is suffering.
Right.
It is suffering due to formations, because it is a basis for suffering.
Now, it gives two reasons, right? The first one is difficult to understand. The second one is just because it is the basis for dukkha, it is also dukkha. But the first one is because it is sankhara dukkha bhavato. Because it is the formation dukkha. Now, you should understand at least three kinds of dukkha. Three kinds of dukkha. The first dukkha is called in Pali dukkha, because it is a real dukkha. Now wait. You go back to paragraph 34. There are different kinds of dukkha.
There are many others.
Yes. So I want to pick up just those three. There are many, about 7 or 8, but just three. Dukkha. Intrinsic dukkha or something like that. And then viparinama dukkha. That means dukkha when change comes. Viparinama means to change. So caused by change. And sankhara dukkha means dukkha because it is sankhara. Sankhara means conditioned. Anything that is conditioned is called sankhara. So there are these three kinds of dukkha. Now when you hit yourself, you suffer pain, right? That is a real dukkha. So that is called dukkha. Sometimes you are sorry. So at that time you suffer this real dukkha. This real dukkha is not difficult to understand. You don't need meditation to understand this dukkha. You hit yourself and that is pain, and you say it is dukkha. Or you are sorry for something, and that is also mental dukkha. And the next one is dukkha when it is changed. That means sukha. Really, the pleasurable feeling is also called dukkha. Because when it is gone, you feel sad, you feel sorry. So you are enjoying something, right? When that enjoyment disappears, it's finished, then you feel something like a sorrow. So although it is sukha, it is pleasurable when it is existing. When it disappears, it is a cause for suffering. So even according to the teaching of the Buddha, what people call happiness is actually suffering in change, because suffering when it is changed. And then the last one is called sankhara dukkha. I will talk about it later also. Sankhara dukkha, because it has a arising and disappearing. Anything that has arising and disappearing is called dukkha, sankhara dukkha. So there are these three kinds of dukkhas. Now here jara, old age is described as dukkha because for two reasons, right? So the first reason is because they are sankhara dukkha, because they are dukkha, because they are karma formations, and they are dukkha because they are the basis for dukkha. So according to this, jara or old age is suffering. Okay, later on you will understand more. And then the third one is death. Death is dukkha. Death is suffering. So death is suffering because it is the basis for dukkha. When death comes, everybody suffers. We are all afraid of death, and so when death comes, we are afraid and we don't want to die, and so on. So death is the basis for dukkha. Therefore, it is described as dukkha. Now you will find that in 46, paragraph number 46, just above the verses. Because it is the basis for dukkha, it is called dukkha, right? So death is a basis for suffering. Therefore, death is called suffering. So these are the reasons why they are called suffering. And then next one is sorrow. Sorrow is also suffering. So they are very easy to understand. And sorrow is suffering because it is the real sorrow, and also it is the basis for dukkha. It is a real dukkha, and also it is a basis for dukkha. Therefore, the sorrow is called suffering. That you find in paragraph 48. Okay. So sorrow, and then lamentation. Lamentation means crying, saying some things. Sometimes people cry saying some things. So that is called lamentation, or in Pali parideva. So lamentation is also called dukkha because it is sankhara dukkha, and because it is the basis for dukkha. And then pain, bodily pain and mental pain. So both are called dukkha or suffering because they are the real dukkha, and also they bring mental pain. Paragraph 50. And then grief, it is also mental pain. It is called dukkha because it is the basis for dukkha, and also it causes the bodily dukkha. It brings also bodily dukkha. And the last one is called despair. That means intense sorrow. And it is also called dukkha because it is sankhara dukkha, paragraph 52, and also it burns the mind or consciousness, and also it is the, what did you say there, of the body. Paragraph 52, just above the verse. It is dukkha because yeah, that one. So these are the reasons why despair is called suffering. And then association with unloved. Here unloved means both animate and inanimate things. To be with a person who you don't love is suffering. To be with a thing that you do not like is suffering. Now that is very plain, right? If you have to live with somebody whom you don't like, then it is great suffering for you. And if you have to live, let us say, in a place where you don't want to be, like a house, very old house, right? If you have to be using the car which is very old, then you don't like it. But say you have no money and you have to be with that old car, and that is also a kind of suffering. So to be associated with beings and also with the inanimate things that you don't like is suffering. And it is suffering because it is the basis for suffering. Paragraph 54. And the next one is to be dissociated from suffering, not to be with those whom you like, those persons and those things that you like. You want to be with somebody and you cannot be with that person. So there is suffering. And you don't want to get away from, say, a very beautiful house, but you have to get away from it. So that is also called suffering. So to be dissociated from the beings and things that you love or that is lovely is suffering. It is suffering because it is also the basis for sorrow, which is dukkha. Now, next one is important. Not to get what you want is suffering. But here, Buddha explains that not you get what you want means sometimes people wish in this way. It would be good if I do not get old. It would be good if I do not die, and so on. Can that kind of wish be fulfilled? You say you don't want to get old, right?
Yes.
But you cannot get that wish. No. So that is what is called here. Not getting what one wants is suffering. Not just say you want a new car and you don't get it, that is suffering. That is another thing. But here what Buddha meant is, it would be very good if we are not subject to rebirth, if we are not subject to old age, if we are not subject to death, and so on. We may make wishes like that, but we will never get those wishes. So not to get what one desires is suffering means not to wish, not to get the wish that we do not get old, we do not die, and so on. That is also suffering. Now the last sentence. In short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. Okay, now you have gone through some of the truth of suffering. Now, and up till this moment, the definition given by the Buddha or the exposition given by the Buddha about suffering is not difficult to understand actually. Now, that birth is dukkha. You can understand easily that birth is dukkha, right? To get old is suffering. You can understand it. Do you need to meditate to understand this? You don't need to, right? So you can easily understand. And death is suffering. And to be associated with those whom you love is suffering. To be dissociated from those who you love is suffering. Not to get what you want is suffering. Right? So these are not so difficult to understand. Now, the understanding of dukkha has 2 levels. One is the popular level. That means easy level. Now the other level is philosophical level. That is more important. Just understanding dukkha on popular level is not enough. In order to get really wearied with life, to get really wearied with the mind and matter or 5 aggregates, you need to understand dukkha on the philosophical level, or deeper understanding of dukkha you need. So the last statement Buddha made about the dukkha, the truth of dukkha is what in brief, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. Or in short, the 5 aggregates that are subject to clinging are suffering. Now, that sentence is not easy to understand. Actually, if you want to understand this, you have to meditate. Only through vipassana meditation can you really understand this. Now, first, the 5 aggregates of clinging. Now, you must understand them. You know the 5 aggregates? You don't know? The first one is rupa, matter aggregate. Aggregate means a group. So matter aggregate, and number 2, the second one is feeling aggregate. And number 3 is called perception. You will not find them here in this because one thing you must understand about Visuddhimagga is it was written by a monk for monks, and so many things were taken for granted. The author thought or assumed that you already understand the 5 aggregates, so he will not explain the 5 aggregates here. That is one reason why Visuddhimagga is difficult to understand. Now, a book written by a monk for monks, okay, meditating monks. So, number 1, what is the number 1? Rupa or matter. The second one, feeling, in Pali Vedana. And 3 is perception. Sanya. In Pali it is called Sanya. And number 4 is it's called formations. Mental formations they call. In Pali they are called Sankhara. And 5 is consciousness. Vijnana. Vijnana, consciousness. So these are called 5 aggregates. Now we are made up of these 5 aggregates. Now a man is made up of these 5 aggregates, a woman is made up of these 5 aggregates, an animal is made up of these 5 aggregates. So we find all these 5 aggregates in human beings, animals, and celestial beings or devas and so on. But outside living beings like trees, houses and so on, there is only one aggregate, the first one, meta aggregate. Now, these 5 aggregates can be the object of clinging. Now you have to understand clinging also here. In Pali it is called upadana. Clinging. Clinging means taking hold of. Now whenever we experience an object, if we are not mindful, we always hold on to that object. Sometimes we take that object, we grasp. You understand the word grasp? To take firmly, no? You grasp or you cling to the object by greed, by attachment, or sometimes by a wrong view. You may take this thing as a permanent thing. So if you take things as permanent, then you have one wrong view. If you take things as an atta, right, as the soul, then that is another wrong view. So whenever we experience an object, we tend to cling to that object, sometimes by greed, or sometimes by wrong view. So the aggregate which we can take, which we can cling to by greed or wrong view are called aggregates that are subject to clinging. That means there are some aggregates that we cannot cling to by way of greed and wrong view. Now, in order to understand this, you have to understand Abhidhamma. Okay. For example, nibbana. Although we may talk about nibbana, we cannot really take nibbana by way of greed, attachment, or wrong view. So nibbana is not subject to clinging. And there are some types of consciousness like the path consciousness and fruition consciousness that are not the object of clinging.